So here we are, Unit 5, Lecture 4, talking about adolescence. So this whole lecture, we're going to we've been going through Erickson, talking about Erickson's different stages, and now we're going to get to adolescence, and we're going to sort of freeze on adolescence because, as we talked about before with Erickson, this is identity versus role confusion. This happens in your teens on into your early 20s because the big question is, who am I? What will I become? Now, the whole who am I and what will I become up until now has either been answered by your parents. Your parents signed you up for whatever activities, classes, etc., or it's been based on not really a lot of facts, of I want to be a doctor when I grow up, but then you get to high school and you realize biology is hard and blood is kind of gross. So now it's what can I become? Who am I? What is my purpose in all these things? So your main task in adolescence is to discover a social identity that you are most comfortable with. Who am I? According to me, as well as according to others. And is that someone I'm comfortable with? And is it possible for me to make a change? Do I want to make a change? So it's very possible that during this time of adolescence, some people will have a bit of an identity crisis, although that is very rare because, unlike animals and people from tribal cultures, teenagers, especially in the Western world, as well as collectivist cultures as well, are given sort of a time. Not too many of us are going to be married at 13 so that we can exchange goats and acres of land with a neighboring tract or something like that. Marriages aren't prearranged in most cultures. Some, yeah, but in most, not so much. So we're given this natural time of evolvement of what do we want to be when we grow up. And the goal of adolescence is to look and act older. You always want to be older. It's strange because then when you get older, you want to look and act younger. You ask a young person how old they are, and they're always going to tell you how old they're going to be. A 7-year-old, I'm 7.5, an 18-year-old, I'm about to be 19. When I become 21, oh, it's game over. But then you get someone in their 30s, well, I just turned 30. It's not like, hey, I'm 30, oh my God, I'm 30, and 40, 50 on up. So, this is a really sort of tricky time that's going on here. Now, in adolescence, this again is a transitional period from childhood to adulthood. We talked about PGA with the formal operational stage, and then this, where you gain frontal lobe activity. If we take a look over here, the frontal lobe is very important. You have an expansion of gray matter, and gray matter is the more thinking matter, the more taking other people's thoughts and minds and seeing it from other people's understanding. We don't have a lot of frontal lobe when we're 5, but then by the time we become 8, 12, 16, 20, we get more gray matter, which allows higher level thinking. What also happens is that as we hit 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, we're higher on sensation seeking. We don't want to be bored. I want to do. And we don't have a lot of impulse control because of this lack of frontal lobe. As we become older, we start to control our impulse control, and then our sensation seeking goes down. Now, ironically enough, where this crosses over is about the age of 21. By the time you finally legally allow someone to drink, their sensation seeking is lower and their impulse control is higher. So what happens with underage drinking, it tends to be binge drinking, whatever, because of, hey, let's try something, let's do something. And we're not thinking of ramifications that are going to happen down the road as well. Okay, so all of these advances of morality, of formal operational, can be hijacked by stress. Because again, the frontal lobe is most shaped by adolescence. Every other part of the brain is firing at 100%. Your amygdala firing at 100%. Everything's going on. Prefrontal cortex still trying to figure it out. So maximum risk-taking, novelty-seeking, peer interaction is happening at this age. This is why teenagers are at a greater risk of substance addiction. Not just the use, but addiction to it. It's vaping, I can control it. No, your impulse control is really low. This is why A teenager doesn't have one beer, they have 9 beers. All I can do is they dive into the deep end. Greater risk of behavioral addiction, of streaming, just sitting there and watching from one episode to the next episode to the next episode before you know 9 of them are gone. Whereas when you become an adult, it's like, oh man, I should be doing something. Gambling, all these sorts of things, riskier risks, adults, you know, you know, risks are like, should I stay up an extra hour tonight? Should I cheat on my diet versus, should I drink and drive? Should I cheat in this relationship? Whatever. They tend to be higher stakes with less control when you are a teen. Now, of course, puberty, and I don't want to get into being your 8th grade health teacher here, but primarily, I guess that's the 9th grade now. Puberty is where you have this changing of going from childhood to adulthood, a little hair on your chinny chin chin and everything else that we talked about before with the endocrine system. But what's sort of different is if you go back to women of 1890, there's about a 7-year interval between when women were sort of first hitting puberty by about 14, 15 versus when they were getting married by 21, 22. Now you've got women hitting this by about 12 and a half, 13, and not getting married until their mid 20s. So we're seeing marriage happen later. So there's this greater period of sort of self-discovery. And that's back in 1995. In the last 25 years, women are getting married even later than they were before. And is marriage really important in the traditional nuclear family and whatnot? Now, again, these changes between boys and girls happen at different rates. Okay, and throughout childhood, boys and girls are similar in height, but as soon as we hit puberty, girls sort of take off a little bit at about the age of 14. And what's also strange is that this difference in maturity greatly impacts the social status as well. The boy who matures fast, the boy who gets the first little hair on his chin, the boy who's the first to get the hair in the pits and a little bit taller, a little bit more muscle development, he's celebrated by the other boys. The other boys look at him and go, oh, wow, look at you. You've got this, you've got that. We're going to pick you first for the dodgeball team because you're strong and I want to be on your team. And he's really celebrated. Yet girls see the other girls start to develop, and there tends to be a little bit of envy there, a little bit of jealousy, a little bit of whatnot. A lot of times girls who develop early aren't too happy that they're developing early. They wear the big hoodies, the big sweaters, their sort of posture comes in because they're getting attention that they're not really happy to be getting it at that particular time. And again, it's not all girls. Some girls are like, ooh, look at my boobies, but for a lot of them, it's really sort of a hindrance to growing up. The fact that you're taller than the boy that you think is cute, and can he handle that difference in height, whatnot. So again, the pace of maturation has very little to do with chronological age and more to do with the current stage of puberty. And this is again why girls reach puberty sooner, but girls also hit age at a slower rate than men. Men hit puberty later, but then age sooner due to stress and whatever else. There's a changing parent-child relationship. That we see 95% of teens do report that they get along either fairly or very well with their parents, but they may not be as warm and forgiving as they were in childhood. Generally get along with mom better than dad. Teens with secure attachment to the family react very similar to their parents and very similar with their teens. Yet a girl's relationship with her mother will greatly impact her relationship with her peers, of that trust and whatnot that goes on with that. There's ample evidence that boys are treated differently than girls, and that's just kind of what it is. We talked about this before. Girls can get the talk. What are you wearing? What is the message you're sending? All that. Boys don't get that talk. Boys accept inequality more than girls. Nothing can be done. That's just how it is. But girls are much more likely to see unfairness, to see inequality, which is why women and girls tend to be more for social justice than boys. That's just how it is. Yet, even with all these inequalities of treatment and the way they're seen and everything else, self-esteem of boys and girls is generally the same. As a matter of fact, at the end of this lecture, we'll talk about why boys sometimes actually have it harder growing up, than girls too. Erickson recognizes at this identity versus role confusion that there are sexual and aggressive urges, but also believe the needs for social approval is just as important at this particular time. Freud, we'll talk about down the road, focuses entirely on sexual urges, and can that be part of it? Sure. But according to Erickson and most psychologists, it's more about identity, because the task of adolescence is to establish who you're going to be. Be yourself, be unique, be you. But you also don't want to be a freak. You don't want to stick out. You don't want everybody pointing at you. So how do I find this balance of being who I am and being unique, but still being accepted by the group? Okay, so do you become different, or do you simply become parent junior at this time? Intimacy, getting to know another person's true identity. When you were a little kid, no one knew you better than your parents. Your mommy and your daddy knew everything about you. Your mommy knew how to kiss the boo-boo, make it better, take care of you, soothe you. No one could reach you better. But then as you get older, you're starting to want that intimacy from others. And again, intimacy, I'm not talking a sexual thing. I'm talking intimacy where you could truly have a friend, and that friend can really get to know you. But again, one of the problems with getting intimacy, the definition of intimacy is truly allowing someone else to know you. Here's the problem. I don't have an identity. I don't know who I am yet. If I'm a teenager and I don't know who I am yet, how can I share that with somebody else? You know, not to mention the fact that when I'm sharing it with somebody else, my friend could, you don't do that, we're not friends anymore. I mean, can I really trust someone that has this nuclear bomb that they could end our friendship at any time? You know, my mom's always going to be my mom. My dad's always going to be my dad. My brother's always going to be my brother. Sister's always going to be my sister. But these friends could leave me at any time. Do I trust that person? Do I trust that relationship? So we're desperate for this new intimacy with new groups. But can we trust this group? Can I even share myself when I don't know who I am? So a lot of those are tricky things. And again, building an identity is very unique to adolescence, because children are very aware of what their parents think. You're a good boy, you're a good girl, you're an all-star, you're this, you're that. Labels are applied to you. Parents, teachers, everybody else, silly, talented, pretty athletic, funny, naughty, whatever. Naughty, I don't think I pronounced that right. Children are aware, and they're told of this. It's put on the grade cards. Yet children do not brood over what am I going to be when I grow up. You may act it out in your little play sessions, but you're always living in the moment. Teens are thinking the future. What am I going to be in the future? And there's changing reward values that happen, and a measure of dopamine. Remember, dopamine is a neurotransmitter of pleasure and happiness. And a measure of dopamine increases based on the size of a reward that was offered. Adolescents were unique when compared to children and adults. Children had more of an excitement for the medium reward. You give them a little reward, a medium reward, and a big reward. The children had more excitement for the medium reward, because the little reward was little, but then this was bigger, and now they were already used to bigger, so to make it a little bit bigger wasn't that much greater. Adults' excitement increased with each successive reward. Small reward, good. Medium reward, better. Large reward, the best. Teens showed a great increase for the medium reward and a huge increase for the large reward, but led to a decrease in the small reward. Okay. And this shows how sometimes teenagers have trouble enjoying the little things. You know, you can't put it together enough little things, because the little things are looked at as a disappointment. It's a disappointment to get the little things. You get worked up for the assessment, the medium, and the test, the large. The daily work's looked at as a hassle, instead of looking at, well, that's the journey, you know. That's the journey. I was talking to my son Teddy just the other day, you know, who's was getting ready to go on a first date, and was, you know, my wife and I were talking to him about it. He goes, well, you know, I just want to see and get through this first date and see if we can get to a second one. I'm like, whoa. Let's not think about a second date. How about we enjoy the first date? Let's enjoy the time. You know, let's enjoy that moment together. Let's take every morsel and everything else. And if that gets to a second date, great. May not. You may not want it. Enjoy the journey. And again, when you're an adolescent, it's hard to enjoy the journey, because you're always thinking of what's next. You know, I can't wait till I graduate high school. you know, and in junior high, I can't wait till I'm out of junior high. And you have trouble, adolescents have a lot of trouble enjoying the moment and just enjoying being in that moment. That, hey, look at that, I can breathe through my nose. Fantastic. Those little things. Adolescents have a little bit more trouble with that than adults do. Now, again, the idea of an identity crisis, which is this inner conflict amongst adolescents of what you're going to be when you're going to grow up and all these other things. It's not much of a deal with adolescents because, again, you don't have to discover an identity today or tomorrow or the next day. You're given a number of years to sort of figure it out over time. So a lot of factors can contribute to the idea of someone getting an identity crisis. Cognitive, emotional, moral development, maybe stunted, awakening sexual drives could get in the way. Future's a reality. You want to be unique, but also want to fit in. So there's all these things of which person do I want to be? But again, having junior high, where you can start to take a couple of electives, high school, you can start to take a lot of electives. Maybe you take a year or two off before you go to college. If you go to college, maybe you want to work for a while. Now's the time to figure it out. You know, my boys are going through that in their early 20s. I got 3 boys in their early 20s, all sort of going, all right, well, what's next? And what do I want? And then they'll get there. They'll figure it out. They've got the time. So a lot of times adolescence doesn't go to that. But what adolescence does have is a fear of exclusion. They had this little video game called Cyberball between 3 people, okay, where you're controlling, let's say I'm controlling player 3. All right, I'm player 3. The ball goes from 1 to 3 to 2 to 1 to 3 to 2. Now I'm just controlling one player. I'm assuming that these others are controlled by other people. All right, so as the ball is going from 1 to 3 to 2 to 1 to 3 to 2, and I'm controlling 3, suddenly 1 doesn't throw it to me. He throws it to 2. Then 2 throws it back to 1. Then 1 throws it back to 2. Then 2 throws it back to 1. Okay, it becomes a game between these 2, and I'm feeling excluded. Again, I think these are other players. Now, the developed adult is going to rationalize, well, this is a stupid game. I'll just move on with my life. I don't want to play anymore. But if you don't have good attachment when you're younger, this is going to activate the amygdala. And this feeling of being left out, this FOMO, this fear of missing out, the feelings of pain and disgust will take advantage of this particular things. It activates the amygdala. We feel, and when we feel the pain of being left out, it feels like a physical pain. And the disgust becomes with us. What's wrong with us? So a lot of times, and again, teens thrive on exclusion. You know, I'm part of this group. Let's not call them. Let's leave them out. Let's, you know, not follow them on Twitter or whatever. It becomes, it can really, that feeling of emotional pain can feel like a physical pain. And that's where anxiety can kick in. Now, again, peers, friends can greatly help impulse regulation, but teens are more influenced by peers' bad behavior than the good behavior. You know, it's good to have good friends, but your friends are better at influencing bad behavior than they are with good behavior. The college roommate that drinks is more likely to get their non-drinking roommate to start drinking than the other way around. The college roommate who doesn't drink is less likely to get their drinking roommate to stop. Eating disorders, body issues are more likely when a teen is surrounded by friends who have eating disorders. And the friend with an eating disorder, if they're suddenly surrounded by healthy people, it's less likely to have an effect on them. Depression, anxiety spreads amongst teens faster than empathy and happiness. We recognize sadness. We latch on to sadness. We latch onto these disorders more than we latch on to the good things that are sort of going on with us. Ask adults, what do you think of yourself and what do others think of you? And there's 2 different parts of the brain that are activated. Here's the part of my brain that is self-reflective on me. Here's the part of my brain, the frontal lobe, that's looking at how do I see it from other people's perspectives of what I am. Ask a teen the same question and the same parts of the brain activate. How they see themselves is greatly similar to how they think others see them. They did this little driving game. They did a study where they had a driving game where adults and teens were asked to drive a course while being egged on by friends to drive more aggressively. Adults, whether they were driving it by themselves or whether they were egged on by their friends, drove the same pretty much both times, high prefrontal cortex activities. Teens their risk increased by 300% when they were egged on by their friends, which again is why most car accidents that happen amongst teenagers is when other teens are in the car. You know, that peer pressure to take risks. Hey, YOLO. Yeah, that's true. So you want to make it last. Consider the following situation. You're with a couple of your best friends on Halloween. They're going to soak windows, toilet paper some homes, but you're not sure whether or not you should. Your friends say you should because there's no way you're going to get caught. This was asked of third graders, sixth graders, ninth graders, and 12th graders. At what age do you think peer pressure was the greatest? Well, this will sort of spoil it for you right over here. And it's in the 8th grade. 8th grade, it's the highest. Okay, here it says 9th grade, but 8th grade, it's the highest. It's the lowest in the 3rd grade, rises in the 6th grade, peaks in the 9th grade, lowest in the 12th grade. And again, this is where school bullying is at its peak. 8th grade, 9th grade. If I'm walking around at school and I hear a bunch of kids cursing, it's far more likely that they're freshmen than they're seniors, because the freshmen are trying to sound old, be cool, whatever else, and you kind of have that impact on others. You're more impulsive at this time. I'm trying to act older. I'm trying to fit in. It's what everybody else is doing. So again, the psychological development that happens at this time, and by the way, we get in a way where we think that it's happening all the time, and it's not. I mean, you look at drug use, alcohol use, marijuana use, cocaine use, it's far less than what it was when I was in high school, but parents think it's way higher because when it does happen, it gets promoted more. So again, adolescent cognitive development. So this is the good news. Now when you start to develop your brain, at adolescence, this is where rationalization starts. You're a little kid and you fail a test. Let's say your parents got into an argument the night before. Your parents got into an argument, knockdown, drag out fight, and they said, that's it, we're getting a divorce, we're moving to Chicago. And then, you fail a test the next day. You're in the 3rd grade, you fail that spelling test the next day, you go, well, I'm just a bad speller. You're in high school and you fail that world history test the next day. And you're just like, well, my parents got in a fight. I was distracted by that. You can start to rationalize it. Not everything is a reflection of you, and that you are a total of everything. Now, again, this can also be a great way to make excuses in life, but this is where you realize that I am not segregated, separated from all these other things happening to me. I am a product of my environment as much as I control my environment. So this starts to occur in your teen years. And again, what age you hit it at has a lot to do with the level of your formal education, the level of your maturity. Are you getting a job? What are your responsibilities at home? Are you the oldest child who's more likely to get to it sooner than the youngest child? And again, girls hit this a little bit sooner than boys. Teenagers are pretty egocentric. Now, again, not egocentric like a 5-year-old, where a 5-year-old sees the world the way they see it and they think everybody else sees it that way. The teenagers' egocentrism is they realize that other people see the world differently than they do, but they just think those people are stupid. Everybody should see the world the way that I do because I'm right and everybody else is wrong. So what's going on right now with COVID and masks and everything else, as much as it could be hard for a lot of adults to see others' perspective, teens, you start that right there as well. You're very idealistic as a teenager. Everyone should see the world the way I do. And then you also have what's called this messiah complex, where you think you have the solutions. If everyone would just, it's a big word. It's a big word with teenagers. It's the word everyone. Everyone's going to notice. Everyone says that. Everybody's watching this. Everyone. If everyone would just, and you feel like you've got the solutions that can solve the world. Well, if the government would just, stop spending money. You like roads, don't you? You like the fire department, don't you? It's nice being in school, isn't it? So you've got a lot of times teens have very simple solutions for very complex problems. So you're very attracted to the idea of you having these things. An adult has an easier time of going, well, I'm not going to solve that problem because that's not my problem. So you can think in the hypothetical, which is great, but it's based on your teen view of the world, and you don't have a lot of adult experiences, which is why, when you're in a relationship as a teenager and you think, I'm going to be married to this person, we're going to get married, we'll be together the rest of our lives. And most adults will go, no, you're not. No, you're not. That's not just them being cynical and dead inside, but they realize that you've got time and you're going to meet other people. And this might be the right, but it might not be. It might not be. So there's a lot of stalls that happen in maturity within adolescence. First off, adolescents love to find fault with authority figures. Love that. Can't get enough of it. If you can prove your teacher wrong, it's awesome, especially if you can prove them wrong in front of your peers. Amazing. Like to have an argument. And sometimes you'll argue just for the sake of arguing, and sometimes you'll be in the middle of an argument. You know you're wrong, but you're going to keep arguing because now it's about winning. Okay, so teens, it's not about learning as much as it's about winning. Indecisive, so much going on. I've got the phone. There's so many things I could watch. I'm watching this show. I'm streaming this show, but what else could I be streaming at this particular time? I have a difficult understanding idea. You can come up with the ideal world, as we said, with the Messiah complex, but you have a hard time living up to it. If everybody would just treat everyone equal, oh, don't give them any money. They're homeless or lazy. If everybody would just be honest, by the way, tell your parents I'm spending the weekend at your house. I'm really going out with my boyfriend. If everybody would just, so you can come up with that. If everybody would just, but you have a hard time putting yourself as part of everybody. Self-conscious, again, the word everyone. Everyone's going to notice. Everyone's going to see this. Everyone's looking at me. Everyone's going to make fun of me. Everybody's going to notice. When everybody's going through their own life and you're not that important to them. You're the star of your life because you're in every scene. But to everybody else's life, you're a character. And to some people, you're a background character. You don't even have any lines. But it's hard for you to see that because you're focused on you. And also this idea of invulnerability. Hey, it hasn't killed me yet. Going 98 miles per hour down Skinner Road hadn't killed me yet, yet. So this feeling of invulnerability. And then when you've got this feeling of invulnerability along with a low impulse control, that's a really, really tough sort of person to be. And by the way, this study that has these 6 stalls in maturity, and you look at these and you go, yeah, I can see that in me. This was done in 1984. And that just shows being a teen is being a teen is being a teen. I don't care if you're the Breakfast Club. I don't care if you're James Dean and Rebel Without a Cause. I don't care if you're whoever. Being a teen is being a teen is being a teen. Growing up, we think we know everything. Only later on do we realize that we don't. Take a look back at some of the stuff that you wore in junior high, some of the music you listened to, some of the shows you watched. You ever watched that stuff, looked at that stuff and go, what the hell was I thinking? But at the time, it seems so cool. It seems so right. It seemed like the thing. And that's the other thing is then once you find something, everybody else likes it, you got to find something new, novelty craving, trying new things, defines adolescence. I'm not okay with this. I want something else. Once we stabilize our tastes, music, food, fashion, we're less likely to seek or want change. We get stuck in an era. As a matter of fact, a lot of people, you can find out what their happiest era of life was is because they still dress like that. My hair, you take a look at my hair right now, it's not much different than it was in college. It's kind of the same style. Why change it? I liked it at that particular time. I still wear pretty much the same clothes, button down, pants, t-shirt, jeans. It's really not changed much. Frustrates my wife sometimes. It's the reason why I won't throw away old t-shirts. Why? It's good. I don't need new things. I'm happy with life. I'm happy with my life. Why try new things? I like the things I got. The teens are all about the new. Greatest drive for change occurs in mid-adolescence, 18 and 19. I want to move out. I want to do this new thing. I can't wait until I get my own place. And then you realize there's problems that come with that. Now, again, anxiety disorders more susceptible to teens because, again, you got less of an impulse control, more sensations that you want to get. Overwhelming sense of fear that's based on specific irrational thoughts. That's what an anxiety disorder is. So teenagers are susceptible to anxiety because anxiety is about not having control. And a lot of what you got going on is a lack of control in your life. Your parents are the ones that decide what your punishment is, what time you got to be home, all these other things. This phone ringing all the time. Why haven't you texted me? Why haven't you done this? What's everybody else doing? Where have they been? Why didn't I get invited to that party? Life is becoming a scorecard. You write a little, if I have a thought that I like kitty cats, fine, I have that thought. But then if I tweet, I like kitty cats, Nobody else has commented. Nobody else. Oh, one person likes it, but only one person likes it. If only one person likes it, it's not. Oh, now three. Okay, now it's starting to feel a little bit more about. So again, the fact that you're allowing others to judge you all the time, which we all do, but you've got real time statistics, and then that sort of drives you. Of course, it's going to leave you, paranoid about your standing in society. When I was in high school, did I wonder whether or not other people liked me? Sure. If I said something and people laughed, did I wonder whether or not they thought it was funny? A little bit, but they laughed, whatever. But when you got people constantly, and I'm doing this and I'm eating my sandwich. Here's the sandwich. I'm going to have a sandwich. Let me take a picture of it. Other people like it. Oh, now I can like it more because other people like my sandwich. So now I can enjoy it. Of course, social media leaves you more susceptible to anxiety. And again, the world at your fingertips. We're less likely hanging out with our friends because you've got the smartphone. Again, this red line, by 2012, 50% of teenagers have smartphones. And notice you're not hanging out with friends because it's the phone. And people go, yeah, but we're Snapchatting. Yeah, but we're FaceTiming. But you're not there. You're only limited to what you see. There's not eye contact. There's not real life moments and moments of silence where you can just be in silence with someone else and be comfortable or uncomfortable, whatever. So you're hanging out with your friends less. You're getting driver's licenses at later ages because I don't need to go anywhere. It's all on my phone. You're not dating as much. Percentage of teenagers going out on dates has gone down dramatically since the release of the iPhone in 8th grade, 10th grade, and 12th grade. And of course, less sex, which, this is one of the reasons teen pregnancy is way down, is the smartphone. Percentage of 8th and 10th graders whose parents always know where they are. Again, you want to talk about anxiety, the fact that, I can still get my wife, what are you doing at the mall? Jesus, I was buying you a gift, but now that's kind of blown. So, but yeah, I cannot imagine being a teenager and my parents knowing where I am all the time, but you live with that. That's day to day. Of course, that's going to have anxiety on you. Binge drinking has gone down because you're not going out as much. So that's good. Percentage of people who've tried alcohol, drugs has gone down. If we go back to this graphic that we saw before, again, as we've had the internet and video games and social media, people are drinking less and doing less marijuana and doing less cocaine, less drugs, because you're never bored. You've always got this. You've always got something to entertain you, something to look at. Total hours per day spent on work and activities. And this is also what teenagers go is I'm too overscheduled. There's not enough time during the day. There's the same amount of time during the day there always was. Teenagers are not working any more than teens before them. As a matter of fact, teens in previous generations worked more than you did. They went out more than you did. They played sports more than you did. They were part of activities more than you were. But what teenagers before you did not have is something like this, which was a full-time job. It seems like there's fewer hours during the day is because you're dividing it between school and work and social life and this guy who's taken hours. So of course it seems like you're overscheduled, but in reality, you really aren't, because again, teenagers today are working less than teenagers before them. You're not getting as much sleep because you're staring at that phone into the night, and that phone and that blue light, whatever, that's not good for you, is keeping you up. And now your circadian rhythm is off. You're more likely to feel lonely since the smartphones come down, because now you see what everybody else is doing and you're like, why aren't I doing that? Or why should I go out? I could just sit here and swipe. And it's not really existing. Declines in adolescents' well-being in 12th, 10th, and 8th graders. The feeling good about myself, self-esteem has gone down. Self-satisfaction, life satisfaction has gone down since 2012 and the smartphone. Now, again, levels of reported happiness. Are you happy? Not as much. And again, it's not because of unemployment. It's not because of the economy. Unemployment's actually gone down, but the idea of low psychological well-being is going up. Smartphone adoption has gone up. Internet time has gone up. And now, again, I'm not saying to completely go cold turkey of your phone, because someone who doesn't have any social media time, none, no internet, no social media, no texting, no game, they're not happy. But the person using about an hour or two a day, that's good. use it for about an hour or two a day. Check your messages, check your social media, whatnot. That's good. But as you start to use it for 2 hours, 5 hours, 6, 9, 10, 29, 40 hours. I'm sorry, this is a week. 40 hours a day. This is a week, less than an hour a week versus 40 hours a week where it becomes a full-time job. Your levels of being not happy go up. Not happy. More happy, less happy. Same thing, hours a week for 12th graders. Internet, social media, texting, gaming, video chat. Not happy, goes up. Now, so there is a kind of good place. Total screen hours per day. 1 to 2 is good. But as you get more than that, higher anxiety, higher depression. If you're not using it at all, it could also be high anxiety, high depression because you don't know what's going on. But it's about, sports, exercise, social interaction, be part of a social group, religious group, print media, looking at real magazines tends to make you happier. Video chat, texting, computer games, the internet tends to be lower levels of correlation of happiness. It's important to note, lower life satisfaction does not lead to increased social media use. It's not necessarily a cause, but it is a sign of it. I'm not saying because someone is depressed or anxious, they're going to use their phone more. But someone who uses their phone more, that is a sign of depression and anxiety. The person who's constantly on it, can't put it down, has to have it on their desk all the time, can't leave it. That's a sign. That's a sign. I'm not saying your anxiety or your depression is causing you to do this, but the fact that you have to do that is a sign of your anxiety and depression. I'm not saying it causes it, but it is a sign of it. Okay. And then when it comes to teenage depression, I'm going to wrap it up here in a bit. When it comes to teenage depression, there have been changes in rates. Unsure of any dramatic change in the rates due to the fact that it was not diagnosed 20 years ago when it comes to teenage depression back in the 80s and 90s. You're just being a teen. No one really looked at it as depression. Depression is higher in teens than most adults suspect, partly due to symptoms thought before as just being a teen. And a lot of times parents don't want to admit that their kid has depression or anxiety because it feels like, well, I'm a bad parent. So sometimes the ego of the parent gets in the way of having this diagnosis taken care of. Now, again, depression can be triggered by a lot of different things. Loss of a loved one, divorce, family moving, lack of support. Those can all happen. And most people, we're going to get upset when those things happen. But the teen gets triggered by this, but then can't come out of it. And unlike depressed adults who seem to act down, or depressed teens, when they're going through a depression, are more likely to strike out because, again, it's a lack of emotion. It's a lack of feeling. It's a numbness. So the teen is going, well, I want to feel something, so sometimes it's drug and alcohol use, trying to escape from reality. I don't want to deal with reality. Let me go to this altered state, change in sexual behavior, becoming pregnant right away, because that way I can leave teenage life and do these adult things, drug use, alcohol use, sexual behavior, whatever. And if I become a mother, I'm an adult, I'm no longer a kid, running away. All these things are typical signs of teenage depression, where you're going to act out, you're going to strike out much more than adults who tend to become withdrawn. Now, again, not all teens do that. Some teens can become very withdrawn as well. And we'll cover this in the last unit when we get to depression. Some other things on teen depression there if you want to take a look at them. When it comes to teen suicide, although the overall numbers have gone down steadily in the last 30 years, there's been a slight uptick recently, slight uptick that's been happening. So again, had been going down, but we're starting to see it go up. The groups that are most at risk, white teens are more likely than non-white teens to commit suicide. Whites make up about 60% of the population. They make up 84% of the suicide cases. Because again, for a lot of white teens, one of the tricks with white skin is sometimes white skin can be thin skin because white kids haven't had to deal with as much racism, discrimination, et cetera, although girls have dealt with more. But yeah, so when the going gets tough and it gets hard, your kid who grew up Black, Hispanic, Asian, whatever else, you learn to toughen up, deal with it, whatever. But for a lot of white teens, never had to deal with that before. The expectation, what's your excuse? You're white, you have all these advantages. Well, then why am I not happy? So there are a higher number of cases. Boys are 2.5 times more likely than girls because girls are more likely to share their emotions. Girls are more likely to attempt it. Guys are more likely to be successful because guys are using a gun. Gay teens are 3 times more likely than non-gay teens. Now, the good news about that is it used to be gay teens used to be 9 to 10 times more likely. So that has gone down. Now, again, do we wish all these numbers would go away? Yes, we do. Yes, we do. We get really upset about teens and we focus on teens all the time because teens are giving up life. They're giving up years. They're just giving away years. And as you get older, you're like, oh, what I would give for those years. And we can't believe they're throwing it away. But when you take a look at all groups, teenagers are actually the lowest risk of any group. As you get older, it becomes higher. As a matter of fact, if you look at this, the highest risk of suicide of any demographic group is white men over 65. Because white men over 65 have rarely had to deal with discrimination, have rarely had to deal with hurdles. And then suddenly you hit 65, you retire, you're a minority. You're old. You're not in charge. For a lot of white men, it's kind of hard to take. So again, for 25 years, 92 to 2007, the overall numbers greatly declined. And this is largely due, I think, personally, to the introduction of the internet. The internet was fantastic because the internet allowed people to go join groups, join chat groups, whatever. And we saw this great drop in suicide rates of where it was peaking before, especially in the 90s. Nirvana, music is a great reflection of society at the time. We saw this great decrease happen in the 90s and the 2000s. So since 2007, that number has increased to levels of were like to the 80s and the 90s. And again, I don't want to harp on this too much, but as this is going up, so does access to the smartphone and this isolation and this loneliness. And again, this can be a great thing. And some of you guys have this and you use this and it's a great part of your life. It's like an arm. It's fantastic. But for some of us that don't have impulse control and these other things, this can become a very, very, very dangerous thing in our lives, especially if never given any guidance. Non-suicide self-injury tends to happen more amongst teens, much more likely with teens facing depression. Hurting yourself, harming yourself, pulling out hair, pulling out eyebrows, picking at skin, things like that, overeating, or even over-exercising, punishing yourself for some reason, cutting skin, burning skin, pulling hair out, self-bruising because you're punishing yourself. Or sometimes, you're sitting there, you're just sort of, hitting your finger with a pencil. Ow, that hurts, but at least I'm feeling something. Sometimes you're sending anonymous mean messages to yourself on the internet. We're seeing this all the time where people will make up accounts, get online and insult their own online profile. Now, sometimes it will be to see how other people react to that insult towards them, but sometimes it's what they think other people are saying. So I might as well say it. So why do you do it? Could be to punish yourself. Could be to distract you from other things going on in your life. Could be to gain approval. It could be because there's other things I can't control, but at least, there's pains that I can't control. I'm going to cause this pain because I can control this pain. So it's a real slippery slope going down. Last thing we need to talk about is boys. Research points to boys having more to overcome in adolescence than girls. Male die at greater rates in infancy, more likely to be diagnosed with learning disabilities. We talked about that before. ADHD, more likely to face discipline in school because guys are told be dominant, be on top. More likely to commit crimes because crime is all about establishing dominance, king of the mountain, all that stuff. We talked about teenage suicide rates a little bit higher because boys are being celebrated for being strong and dominant. Join the team, join the sports team, beat them, dominant, king. Guys are taught in elementary school, play games like Smear the Queer. It's a sign of masculinity. Boys that study hard are ridiculed. Schools have nerd day where you make fun of kids who came to school to, do what? Study. Boys are discouraged from showing emotions. They're discouraged from talking about their feelings. That's why a lot of guys need to have that friend that's a girl so they can actually talk about their emotions. And if we're not allowed to talk about our emotions, how are we ever going to evolve? As a result, men are more likely to abandon their families. You're more likely to be the victims of or commit violence. You're jailed at greater rates. And girls are passing boys on testing, graduation rates, catching up in the business world. They're capable hunters and gatherers. And guys right now are going, well, what's my role in life? And that's why a lot of guys right now want to go back to the way it was. They're afraid of this woke generation, Me Too, and everything else, because the question becomes, what's your role in it? The girl doesn't need you to hold the door open anymore. She doesn't need you to protect her anymore. What's your role? And for a lot of guys, are having a really tough time sort of coming to terms with that. All right. So with that, we will get to the rest of Erikson and talk about adulthood in the next lecture.